He canceled our wedding 99 times for his assistant. So I cut the dress in front of everyone and disappeared without looking back forever. I dated a mob boss for 6 years. We planned 99 weddings. Guess how many times I became a bride? 0. Every time his fragile assistant, Helen, tripped or got kidnapped, he rushed off faster than a smuggling boat leaving port. So this time, I was done playing. I disappeared. And guess what? He lost his mind. It was our 99th wedding attempt. The venue was a private yacht anchored off the coast of Port Monroe. A white carpet stretched across the back deck, and in the distance, the statue of Concordia stood quietly over the golden sea. This time, there were no invitations, no friends, just a few close relatives who treated the whole affair more like a formality than a celebration. A few days before, I had been ambushed during a family meeting by one of Anthony's old rivals. I escaped alone, twisting my ankle in the process. It was still swollen, but I pushed through and confirmed the final sequence of vows with the officiant. Anthony didn't seem to care. He hadn't visited the bridal suite, hadn't looked at my foot. He spent the entire pre-ceremony break crouched in the VIP lounge, carefully wrapping a bandage around Helen's toe that she had scraped while boarding the yacht. He gently held her foot and blew over the wound as if she were a frightened animal. Across the deck, my mother watched with a stormy expression. "He never did that for you," she said quietly. "This isn't a wedding. It's still a humiliation." I put on the same dress that had waited for me through 98 failed ceremonies. At sunset, I stood at the stern of the yacht, waiting for Anthony to walk me down the aisle of roses. Minutes passed. He never came. When I approached the VIP lounge, 2 armed guards blocked my way. "The boss has an urgent matter to attend to," one of them said. "What urgent matter?" I asked. The door opened. Anthony came out supporting Helen. His face was tense with worry. "Her foot is infected," he said. "I need to take her to the emergency room. Let's put this on hold. Once she feels better, I'll be completely yours." He didn't even look at me. He just helped her into the helicopter. That year marked our 6th anniversary. It was also the 99th time he canceled our wedding because of Helen. In the past, I would have collapsed, screamed, begged. But this time, I just smiled weakly. "Sure, Helen's foot can't wait." He stopped, surprised by my calm. "When I return, I'll bring you fresh lilies," he said. But I had never liked lilies. I once had an asthma attack at a banquet due to lily pollen. He had panicked. He had taken me to the hospital and promised me he would never forget. Apparently, even that didn't last 6 years. The helicopter rose into the sky, fluttering my veil and lifting rose petals from the deck. I turned to look at the guests. "The wedding is canceled," I announced. Then I raised the scissors in my hand and cut the dress I had worn 99 times. The white satin fell around me like a silent funeral. I looked at the empty sky where the helicopter had disappeared and whispered, "Anthony, 6 years of waiting ends here, just like this dress." It wasn't until the end that my mother finally spoke. "Honey, come back with us to Valparaiso." She had said it before, but this time it sounded different. Sitting on the edge of the yacht's deck, I looked up and found her hopeful eyes. The truth was that my father was the don of the largest mafia syndicate in Valparaiso. I had been raised in his inner circle, prepared to inherit the business someday. But when I went to college, I met Anthony. I left everything behind and followed him to Monroe, a city of greed and betrayal. Anthony came from nothing and hated anyone mentioning his past. I never told him the truth. To him, I was just a girl from a struggling neighborhood. For 6 years, I worked my way up in a syndicate, from a simple position to a seat at the main table. People called us a lethal duo. Ruthless in business, unstoppable in love. I once thought I would tell him who I really was, but that moment never came. Now it no longer mattered. "I'll be back." "Don't worry," I said. "We won't let you suffer again," she replied. Back in the apartment I shared with Anthony, everything felt empty. I made a pot of pasta and opened Instagram. Helen had posted a photo. She wore a tight dress, clinging to Anthony, smiling as if the world belonged to her. The caption said, "I tricked the stoic boss into playing golf. I promised him roasted lamb ribs at my house, and he said yes." I immediately knew he wouldn't come home. As always. Fortunately, we had never processed a marriage certificate. The next morning, I packed my things and went to headquarters. I handed in my resignation to the capo in charge. "You're one of the best," he said. "Sharp instincts, Reliable, don't throw this away. As he spoke, Anthony walked in. He had visible hickeys on his neck. He reeked of that same sweet perfume. I remembered how he used to hate marks. He said they ruined his image. Turns out he didn't hate marks. It was that I left them. The capo turned to him. Perfect timing, boss. Talk to your girlfriend. She's quitting. Did you fight again? It has nothing to do with him, I said firmly. Anthony's eyes fixed on mine. Is this because I canceled the wedding again? The capo felt the tension and left quietly. Anthony stepped forward, his voice rougher. Now, I told you Helen hurt her foot. That's all. I'm not angry, I replied. I'm just exhausted. I need a break in a new place. If you're tired, take a vacation, he said. But don't leave the syndicate. Now people will think Helen caused it. How is she supposed to maintain her position? He didn't care about me, just Helen's image. I didn't answer. I looked at the hickey again. He noticed and raised his hand to cover it. It's just a mosquito bite, he muttered. I almost laughed. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. There we go. No more drama. I'll take you to dinner at Purse. Let's make peace, okay? I said nothing. He mistook my silence for agreement, but I had already decided I wasn't going to say goodbye. I was leaving Belmont forever. Anthony. Helen burst in without knocking. Oops, she laughed. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just need help with this deal. Anthony immediately turned to her. She approached, whispering, intertwining her arm with his. As they left, leaving the door open long enough for her to throw me a smug smile, the room fell silent. The bracelet on my wrist slipped. The one Anthony gave me on our first anniversary. Strong as diamonds, he had said. I stared at it for a long time. Then I threw it in the trash, along with everything I still felt for him. I left the city before dawn. No note, no message, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. The last thing I did was withdraw the funds from the safe behind the bookshelf. Not Anthony's money, mine. Every penny I had earned in the last 6 years. I had kept it separate for a reason I hadn't understood until now. Maybe I had always known I would need an escape. By 8 in the morning, I was gone. No one saw me leave. No guard questioned me in Monroe. Everyone assumes that if you walk like you belong, you do. I slipped into a discreet car with tinted windows and a trunk full of memories I never wanted to unpack again. The trip to Valparaiso took 5 hours. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence was enough. Along the road, green hills passed like waves, and with each mile between Anthony and me, I felt my lungs expand. For the first time in years, I could breathe. When I arrived at the complex, 2 guards dressed in black greeted me at the door. Welcome home, Miss Isabella. It had been years since anyone called me that. Inside, the mansion was just as I remembered. Tall columns, dark mahogany, windows reflecting both sunlight and secrets. My father was at the top of the stairs, flanked by advisors and lieutenants. His face remained indecipherable, but his eyes softened. The moment he saw me, he said simply, "It was time." I climbed the stairs one slow step at a time. At the top, he extended his hand. I took it, and with that, I returned to the world I had abandoned. "Your room has been kept as it was," he said. "Although I imagine you won't rest much." He was right. I wasn't here to hide. That night, the heads of the 5 families gathered in the East Wing for a dinner in my honor. It wasn't a warm affair. It was a statement. She's back, and she's no longer just a mob girlfriend waiting for a broken promise. I wore black. No makeup, no jewelry, just the faintest trace of the scars that 6 years had left behind. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. In this world, silence is louder than betrayal. "Are you ready to reclaim your seat?" asked Don Victor, drinking from a crystal glass. I nodded. Yes, but not just my seat. I want control of the Western docks, and I want total oversight of the Eastern Circuit. There was a pause. Sharp eyes turned to my father. He nodded with a single movement. Granted. No more shadows. No more sidelines. I was done being secondary to a man who never saw me. By morning, I was already in the field. Muddy boots, hands signing contracts, voice inspiring respect. The dockmasters bowed to me once again, and whispers began. The Mafia princess is back, and this time, she's not smiling. Back in Monroe, Anthony noticed. It started with missed calls, then text messages. "Are you safe? Why didn't you tell me you were leaving, Isabella? This isn't like you." On the 3rd day, he sent someone to check my apartment. Of course, I was no longer there. All that remained was the empty closet and the lingering smell of betrayal. Then came the message I had been waiting for. I miss you. I read it once. I deleted it. I didn't miss him. I missed who he pretended to be. Weeks passed. Valparaiso prospered. My circuits grew faster and cleaner. I restructured finances, eradicated 2 corrupt captains, and doubled profits in less than a month. At night, I stood by the window, looking at the stars. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I planned. Until one night, I received a gift. A small velvet box. No sender. Inside was a pair of diamond earrings I had once admired at a gala. Underneath them was a note that said, "I remember." I left the box and smiled because it was working. Anthony never chased anyone, he commanded, but now he was falling apart because I had finally done the one thing he never expected. I left first. 2 days later, a man arrived at the complex alone. No weapons, just a sealed envelope. "For Isabella," he said, bowing. I opened it. Inside was an invitation, written by hand, with Anthony's signature at the bottom. Dinner. No guards, no excuses, just us. I showed it to my father. He frowned. "It could be a trap." "I know," I replied. "But I want him to think I'm still accessible." "Are you?" I looked him in the eyes. "No." Still, I accepted. I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes late. Anthony was already there alone, true to his word. He stood when he saw me, his eyes scanning my face as if searching for a familiar detail that no longer existed. "You cut your hair?" he said. "Yes. Does it look good?" He didn't answer. We sat down. The table was set for 2. Candles flickered between us. A string quartet played in the background. He had reserved the entire place. "You disappeared." "You left me," he sighed. I didn't know it had gone so far. It wasn't just Helen. "I know." He leaned forward. 6 years, Isabella. We built everything together. You can't just leave like that. I didn't leave. I fled. And for good reason. I made mistakes. You made decisions. Over and over again. He lowered his gaze for the first time. He had no words. I sipped water. "Why did you call me here?" He hesitated. "Because I still love you." I let that sink in. Then I stood up. You love having someone who never says no, who waits, who sacrifices. But that woman is gone. And in her place is someone who finally understands her worth. I placed a small silver coin on the table. The Valparaiso syndicate shield. "I'm not going back to you, Anthony. I'm going to recover everything you thought I gave up. And I'm going to start with the eastern ports." His eyes widened. "Those are mine." "Not anymore." He stood up too, his voice lowered. "This is war." I smiled coldly. "No, Anthony, this is closure." And I left. As I exited the restaurant, the night air wrapped around me like armor. In the distance, I could hear the faint sound of waves breaking. Belmont had just lost its queen, and Valparaiso had recovered its heiress. I never looked back, not even when I heard him say my name. Because this time, I wasn't waiting. I was building an empire without him. 2 weeks after our final confrontation in Belmont, the first blow came. A pharmaceutical shipment bound for the eastern ports disappeared halfway through. No shots, no trace, just silence. It was too clean to be a random robbery. It was a message. Anthony had decided to fight. Good, because I was done shrinking. That morning, I called an emergency meeting at the Valparaiso complex. The room filled quickly. Captains, enforcers, advisors, old allies, new faces. I stood at the head of the table, calm, controlled, lethal. "We lost a shipment last night," I said. "It was diverted by someone with high-level access." "Belmont?" someone murmured. I nodded. "This isn't a guessing game." It was Anthony. "He wants to test our response." The room tensed. Some looked uneasy. Anthony still had influence. He still inspired fear. "He trained you," said Arthur, an old loyalist. "He knows your moves." "He trained a version of me that no longer exists," I replied. And they believed me because I had changed. After the meeting, I went to the vault room and opened a drawer marked with a single name. Project Knox. Inside were documents, blueprints, surveillance records, plans. I had started them long ago, when I first noticed Anthony's divided loyalty. I had never used them until now. I spread the files on the marble table and began moving the pieces. Anthony thought he was facing the woman who once waited for him at the docks and in Belmont Suites, But he was wrong. He was facing the daughter of a capo who had taught her to lead armies without raising a single weapon. Over the next 5 days, I secured the Eastern Circuit. I replaced the security system at all major ports. Personnel reassignment. Every guard who had accepted a bribe was fired. Every route was randomized. Then I made my move. A routine delivery to Port Monroe was altered. 2 hours late, different container numbers, diverted personnel. I knew Anthony would notice, and he did. When the decoy shipment arrived, his men hijacked it as expected. But instead of pharmaceuticals, the boxes contained concrete blocks and GPS trackers. The moment the shipment crossed Monroe City line, I pressed a button on my phone. Dozens of text messages were activated to police contacts, journalists, rival gangs. I signed them anonymously, of course, but the fallout was like thunder. Word spread that Anthony's gang had been caught stealing worthless cargo. Videos were leaked, showing his men struggling to unload blocks while sirens wailed in the background. It wasn't about the money, it was about humiliation. The next day, he called me. "Do you want a war, Isabella? You have it." Click. I didn't flinch. Instead, I organized a gala for the outside world. It was a celebration of Valparaiso's legacy. For those inside, it was a display of power. I wore a fitted black suit and walked through the ballroom with my head high. People looked at me in awe. The girl who was once in a man's shadow was now the storm. He could not contain me. A man approached with a glass of wine. "Miss Isabella, congratulations. The docks have never run so well." "Thank you." He smiled. "Some say you're provoking Anthony too much, that you should have left quietly." I sipped the wine and replied, "If I had left quietly, I wouldn't be here to toast my victory." That night, under the crystal chandeliers, I felt no remorse, because I had given Anthony everything, and he had made me into this. A week later, I received another surprise. A package arrived with no return address. Inside was a red velvet box. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a bullet engraved with one word: loyalty. There was no note. I didn't need one. It was his way of saying I had broken something sacred. I didn't deny it because loyalty given blindly isn't loyalty, it's slavery. And I had freed myself, but I knew what came next. He wouldn't just attack my business. He would go after people, and I had to be ready. So I visited the woman I had once ignored for years. Andrea was my cousin. We had grown up together and trained together, but she had always been secondary to me, eclipsed. I had left her behind when I followed Anthony to Monroe, but now I needed her. She opened the door in a simple blouse, holding a wrench. "Isabella, I came to apologize." She blinked. "For which part? The years of silence, or the fact that you only show up when you need something?" "Both." She leaned against the doorframe, then stepped aside. "Come in." We sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by scattered blueprints and tools. "I need someone I trust," I said. "Someone who remembers who I was before all this. And now that you've burned Belmont to the ground, you want me by your side? I want you with me before the fire spreads here." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "I'm in." We spent the next 3 nights assembling a team. All women, all overlooked by the old guard, cunning, silent, lethal. We called them the discarded ones. Each had a story, a betrayal, a scar, and each had sworn never to be underestimated again. With them, I reclaimed 3 warehouses that Anthony's men had secretly controlled. I cut their surveillance systems, exposed their accountant for laundering funds through phantom charities, and every time I made a move, I left a single business card. 6 years, 99 weddings, no bride. He understood what it meant. It was personal. One night, I received another call. This time, it was from my mother. "Your father wants to talk to you." I entered his study an hour later. He was by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "You're becoming a force," he said. "But you're also becoming a target. I know. You should end this before it becomes something you can't escape from." "I don't plan to escape." He turned. "Do you love him?" I loved who he pretended to be. What if there's still a part of him that's real? Then he should have shown it before I became a weapon. There was a long silence. Then he said quietly, "End it cleanly, Isabella. Don't become what you tried to destroy." I didn't answer because part of me already knew it was too late. Anthony had crossed lines that couldn't be undone, and I had built a machine that wouldn't stop until it ran out of fuel or enemies. 3 days later, I got news that Helen had left the country. Why? I asked. The informant shrugged. No one knows. Some say she broke under pressure. Others say Anthony sent her for her safety. I didn't believe either. Helen had always been a strategist. If she left, it was because she saw what was coming. And what was coming was something neither she nor Anthony could stop, because I had already written the final chapter. And in it, I didn't need to become a bride. I needed to become a legend. I received the photo at 3 a.m. No text, no caption. Just the image. Anthony standing in front of the Valparaiso Palace of Justice in broad daylight, hands in pockets. Unfazed, confident, with a half-smile on his face as if he owned the world. Below the photo, scribbled in ink, "Come home, we were better together." I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned off my phone, but the next day, he made his message louder. 3 of my lieutenants were arrested. During a routine inspection at the eastern docks, police found enough planted evidence to keep them locked up for months. I had seen that trick before. Anthony had taught it to me. He was getting bold, which meant he was getting desperate. Later that afternoon, Andrea burst into my office. She had a tablet in her hand. "He made a public statement," she said. "Watch this." She played the video. Anthony was behind a podium, surrounded by fake charity banners and flashing cameras. His voice was calm, rehearsed. I've always believed in second chances, in forgiveness. Some people build walls, others build bridges. I choose to build. He looked directly at the camera. "And to the one person who taught me what loyalty meant, I hope you come back. There's still time to stop this war before it burns everything we built." He had polished the story. He made himself look noble, repentant, as if I were the one destroying peace, as if I had started this. I almost admired the performance. Almost. Andrea narrowed her eyes. "He's turning it around, making you the villain." "Let him," I said. "The real moves are already in motion." That night, I met with the logistics team. We tracked all of Anthony's shipments through Belmont's underground route. For years, he had smuggled weapons through a flour import business. It was brilliant until now. We intercepted one truck, then another, diverted them, took the cargo, sent the drivers back unharmed but shaken. I wanted Anthony to know I could have finished them, but chose not to. He needed to understand that mercy isn't the same as weakness. 3 days later, he responded. I came home to find my apartment ransacked. Not the Valparaiso mansion, but my old one in Belmont, which I hadn't returned to in weeks. I had left one thing behind. A small notebook full of poems I had written when I first fell in love with him. He burned it. The ashes were scattered on my bed. On the wall, spray-painted in harsh letters, were the words, "Queen of Nothing." I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I sat among the ruins and wrote my final move. I called a meeting of all the heads of the Eastern syndicates. They arrived that night, each with their own guards, each curious and cautious. We met in the Great Hall, previously used for coronation dinners. This time, it was war. I propose a merger, I announced. A new alliance. No more titles. No more thrones. A single syndicate, built by all of us. Led by vote, not by blood. There was a long silence. Then a rough voice from the back spoke. And who proposes this? You? I nodded. Yes. Because you want Anthony gone? No, I said calmly. I want the game to change. They listened, because they were tired, too. Tired of Anthony's greed, of my father's era, of being pawns in a war built on emotion. By the end of the meeting, 12 syndicates had signed. The Eastern Coast now answered to a council. Not to Anthony, not to me. That night, I walked alone to the cliffs overlooking Belmont Bay. The sea was dark. The stars above me twinkled like ghosts of old dreams. Anthony had once brought me here on our first anniversary. We drank wine and kissed under the moonlight, promising never to betray each other. What a lie that turned out to be. I closed my eyes and let him go. The love, the hope, the pieces of me still tied to that memory. Then I turned around and left the past behind. Back in the city, Anthony was falling apart. His accountant fled to Greece. 2 of his captains defected. Helen was still missing, and rumors claimed she was selling secrets to the highest bidder. He stopped attending meetings. He stopped smiling. He stopped pretending. And then he sent one last message. A dinner invitation, not a trap, a peace offering. The card said, "One last dinner, no guards, no lies, just you and me." Andrea said it was foolish. My father said it was suicide. But I went anyway because I needed to see what remained. The place was familiar. A rooftop restaurant where he had once promised me the world, with amuse-bouches and red wine. It hadn't changed, but we had. Anthony was sitting alone, drinking a glass of something amber. When he saw me, he stood up. His face was thinner, his eyes sunken. "You came. I wanted to see what you've become." He gestured to a chair. But she wasn't just using me. She was being paid quarterly by someone else. "Who?" "Valley Investments." I froze. "That's your front." He shook his head. "It used to be. 3 years ago, it was quietly hollowed out. Shares were sold. Silent investors. Ghost boards. Someone wanted control without visibility, and Helen was their infiltrator. I took the USB drive and left without saying a word. Back at a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, I plugged it into my laptop. Documents, transfers, meeting records. One name kept appearing. Luciano. A discreet financier known for financing political campaigns, art galleries, and private militias. He wasn't a mafia man. He was something worse. A power collector. And now I understood. Helen was never Anthony's assistant. She was Luciano's asset. Her job was to keep Anthony chasing chaos, while Luciano took control from below. And me, I was just collateral damage. A woman with too much influence, too much heart. He set us against each other while building an empire in the darkness. I stared at the screen for hours. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to take the story to the press. I wasn't going to cry, or flee, or ask for help. I was going to bury Luciano, brick by brick, word by word. And I was going to start by visiting the last person who still had enough rage to light the fuse with me. Anthony. It was past midnight when I arrived at his complex. Half the lights were off. The guards barely looked at me. Inside, he was sitting alone in the study, shirt half unbuttoned, whiskey in hand, eyes lost in something I couldn't see. He looked up when I entered. "You came. Don't get used to it." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Want a drink?" "No." He poured anyway. Then I said it. "Luciano." He went still. The name pierced something in him. "You know, I know everything now." He looked at the glass. Then he threw it across the room. It shattered against the fireplace. "He used us both." "No. He used you. He underestimated me." He laughed bitterly. "I underestimated you." Silence. I pulled out the USB drive. "Here's the proof. Bank transfers, meeting records, Helen's real payroll." He took it, barely blinking. "Will I kill him?" "No, you won't." His head jerked. "Because I will." He studied me. "You're not the same woman I left waiting on the yacht." "No," I said softly. "She died when you boarded that helicopter without looking back." He didn't apologize. I didn't ask him to. Instead, I stood up. "I need your help." "One night." He nodded. "Deal." We met the next night at a warehouse near the old tracks. Anthony brought a small team, silent, loyal. I brought Andrea and 2 of the discarded ones. Luciano was attending an exhibition at a gallery, one of his vanity projects. We didn't bring weapons, we brought the truth. Projected throughout the gallery. Every document, every deal, every betrayal. While guests sipped champagne and praised the lighting, emails began scrolling across the ceiling. Luciano paled. Security surrounded him, but it was too late. The board of directors had seen enough. So had his investors. By midnight, Luciano had lost everything, and by morning, he had disappeared. No one knows where he went. Some say he fled to Europe. Others say Anthony found him. I never asked. I didn't care because justice doesn't always come with a trial. Sometimes it comes with silence. And a woman you thought you had destroyed, standing where you expected ashes. Anthony never tried to kiss me. He never tried to apologize. But when I left the warehouse that night, he said, "I should have followed you the night you cut the dress." I turned around. "You should have loved me before." I learned to love myself more. Then I left again. This time, not from pain, but from power, because I had finally burned the right bridges and didn't need to go back. I disappeared again, not from fear, but in peace. After Luciano's fall, the city buzzed with rumors. Some said he had been executed by a rival syndicate. Others believed he fled to a private island with a new identity. I knew the truth was somewhere in between, and I had no interest in finding out. He had served his purpose. It reminded me that love without power is a prison, And power without purpose is poison. The day after the exhibition, I returned north to the house by the cliff, to the silence I had earned. I deleted all the old files, every image of Anthony, every voice note I had saved during our 6 years together, and when I finished, I lit a small fire in the fireplace and watched the digital ghosts turn to ashes on the screen. It didn't hurt, not like before. Andrea visited me a week later. She brought wine, fresh bread, and news. The Eastern Syndicate is thriving without centralized power, she said, taking off her boots. Your council idea worked. No blood has been spilled in 35 days. That's a record. I nodded. Good. Could you come back? I don't want to come back. She studied me in silence. You say that like you mean it. Now I do. Because of Anthony? No. Because of me. She didn't insist. Instead, we sat on the porch and watched the sea crash against the rocks. Sometime between the second glass and the quiet hour before dawn, she asked the question I had buried deep. Did you ever really love him? I thought for a long moment. Then I answered honestly. I loved who I thought he was. I loved the idea that someone could see me completely and still choose to stay. I loved the fairy tale I built in my head more than the man I had in front of me. Andrea leaned back. We all do that at least once. And you? I loved someone once. He chose someone else. However, I didn't burn cities for him. I smiled weakly. Your self-control is impressive. We didn't talk about it again. The next morning, she left, and I returned to my quiet routine. Almost a month passed before I saw him again. Anthony standing at the edge of the cliff behind my house like a ghost. He wore black. No guards, no arrogance, just exhaustion and something like sincerity. I didn't call out to him. I left him there. After a while, he turned and saw me leaning against the doorframe. Did you find me? He nodded. I heard you were here. It took me a while to believe it. I'm not hiding. I know. We looked at each other across the distance. Then he asked, Do you want me to leave? I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, That depends on why you came. He walked slowly toward me, stopping at the porch steps. I wanted to see what you became. You could have seen the news. I needed to see it for myself. We fell silent again. The kind of silence that used to feel heavy between us. Now it simply was. He sat on the steps. I didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. Everything has changed, he said quietly. I know. I no longer run the ports. I no longer run anything. Was it your choice? No, but maybe it should have been. He looked at me. Are you no longer angry? No, not at all. I think I exhausted every kind of anger a person can carry. All I have left is clarity. He nodded. You became what we used to pretend you already were. I stopped pretending. We were silent again. Then he asked, Do you still love me? That question should have hurt me. It didn't. I sat across from him. No, I said honestly. I loved the idea of being chosen. You made me believe that love required sacrifice, that waiting made me strong. But no, it made me small. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, tired eyes. I tried to replace you with Helen. I thought if I could protect someone else, maybe I would be worth something. And now I know. I never protected anyone. I was hiding. We sat in silence for several minutes, the waves breaking behind us like background music for a scene. Neither of us knew how to end it. Finally, I stood up. You're no longer the villain of my story, Anthony. He looked up. But you're not the ending either. He didn't argue. Instead, he smiled weakly. A sad and grateful smile. Can I ask one more thing? Yes. Did you ever imagine a future with me that ended differently? I nodded. Yes. I used to dream of waking up next to you. Coffee on the nightstand, wedding ring on my hand, and peace in my heart. And now? Now I wake up alone and still have peace. He stood up. I won't come back again. You don't have to. He walked toward his car. He stopped halfway. Then he turned and said, You were always stronger than I deserved. And then he left. No dramatic gestures, no promises, just a man who had finally stopped pretending. That night, I stood on the cliff and let the wind whip my hair. There were no tears, no regrets, just a truth that lingered in the sea air. Closure isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes in a quiet conversation on wooden steps under a gray sky with no audience or witnesses. And sometimes, that's enough. In the following days, I returned to writing, not poetry, not love letters, but stories of women who left, of women who burned bridges and built empires from the ashes of recovered loyalty, of broken silence. Every morning, I wrote with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. And little by little, people started finding me. A neighbor who brought fresh tomatoes in exchange for conversation. A teenager who wanted help with an essay on power and gender. A retired fisherman who asked me if I would help him manage his accounts. They didn't know who I was before, they only saw who I was now, and that was finally enough. One afternoon, as the sky burned orange over the water, Andrea called. "You know, the council left your chair open. I don't want it. You earned it. I earned the right to choose." She laughed. "Fair. Do you want to come visit me next month?" "Maybe." "Anthony's gone. He moved to the mountains. No one has seen him since." "Good. Are you okay, Isabella?" I looked at the sea. "Better than okay. Then I'll leave you." Click. I lay back, the breeze brushing my skin. This wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't a revenge story. This was a rebirth. And for the first time in 6 years, I didn't want anything from the past. No apologies, no justice, not even recognition. I just wanted tomorrow, and it was finally mine. Spring came quietly. The waves softened, the skies turned pale blue. Wildflowers climbed the cliffs, like a slow applause from nature. It had been 4 months since I last saw Anthony, 2 since I heard Andrea's voice, and exactly 6 weeks since I opened my laptop and sent the final draft of my manuscript. Title: 99 Dresses and a War. It wasn't fiction, but I never said it was a memoir. I changed the names. I left out the blood. I focused on heartbreak and the slow unraveling of a woman who waited at the edge of love until there was nothing left to wait for. I didn't expect it to be accepted. But the email came on a Thursday. "We would be honored to publish your work." No one knew who I was. They only knew the voice on the page. That was enough. And maybe that was the point. To be seen for who I had become, not for what I had survived. I printed the contract, signed it, and placed it in the outgoing mailbox at the local post office. The employee smiled. "Congratulations, Carmen." It was the first time I didn't flinch at hearing the name. I walked home barefoot, the cold ground anchoring me. When I got to my porch, a car was waiting. Not black, not armored, just a simple silver sedan. Inside was a woman I hadn't seen in almost a decade. Helen. Older now, thinner, her hair shorter. She got out, with her hands slightly raised as if approaching a wild animal. "I thought you'd shoot me," she said. "You're not worth a bullet." She smiled faintly. "That's fair." I didn't invite her in. We stood at the edge of the porch, the wind pulling at our jackets. "What do you want?" "Not forgiveness." "Good. You wouldn't get it." I came to explain. "You came to ease your conscience. Let's not pretend this is for me." She looked away. "You're always smarter than me." "No. I just never underestimated myself like you expected me to." Helen nodded slowly. "You were supposed to be a loyal shadow, silent and easy to push aside. You never understood what loyalty costs. Now you do. Do you regret it?" She hesitated. "Yes, but not because I lost. Because I hurt someone who never deserved to be used." I crossed my arms. "So why now? Why come here after all this time?" She searched in her coat pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in velvet. "I kept this." I opened it slowly. Inside was a thin silver ring, simple and unpolished. A small inscription inside read, "To my future bride." "I stole it," she said. "He made it for your 100th wedding attempt." I stared at the ring for a long moment. Then I placed it on the porch railing and stepped back. "Leave it and go." Helen's eyes no longer showed defiance, only guilt. She left without saying a word. When the car disappeared down the road, I stood for a moment, looking at the ring. Then I picked it up and threw it over the cliff. I never saw where it landed, because I no longer needed to know. The next day, my book went to print. It sold 2,000 copies the first week, 10,000 the third. Book clubs called. Podcasts sent emails. Women wrote letters. You told my story. I thought I was the only one waiting. Finally, I left, too. I cried reading the letters. Not because I was sad, but because I realized my silence had never been power. My voice was. One day, I received a package from an address in the mountains. No name, no note. Inside was a worn photograph. Anthony and I, laughing at the rooftop restaurant during the early days, before the lies, before Helen, before the waiting. On the back, he had written 4 words. I remember our laughter. I burned the photo, not out of hatred, but in peace. Because the woman in that image was gone, and the woman I had become didn't need proof that it had once been good. I needed freedom, and I had it. A year later, my book became a play. I sat in the back row on opening night, anonymous, my heart pounding. When the curtain rose, the audience gasped, cried, applauded, and when the actress who played me stood at the edge of the stage in a torn white dress with scissors in her hand and whispered, "This is where it ends, just like this dress," I smiled. They stood up. They applauded. But I didn't bow because the applause wasn't for me. It was for every woman who had waited too long, for every woman who had freed herself. I walked home under the stars. The theater faded behind me. The wind felt warm. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Anthony, or Helen, or betrayal. I was thinking about morning, about the smell of salt and coffee, of unwritten pages, and untold stories of what comes after survival. Because this story didn't end in marriage, didn't end in revenge. It ended in recovery. And I would write the next chapter not as a woman who had been broken, but as one who finally knew she never needed to be chosen to matter.